Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League is now out. Everyone is diving in and collating their own thoughts on what is turning out to be the first big controversial video game release of 2024. And it wouldn't be a What Culture Gaming video with you and Pass in it if we weren't talking about that. It's me, Ewan, and it's Josh.
Hello, guys.
We're going to talk about Suicide Squad because we've been playing it for the past few days. We got codes. There was obviously a great deal of controversy over the fact that outlets did not receive codes. Usually, you know, when a big game like Suicide Squad comes out, we get, you know, in ideal circumstances, we get hands-on and we get to play it a little bit early and collate our thoughts and give it a big review score. But that has not happened, with the excuse being given that because it is a live service game, the service couldn't be switched on. So there was an early access launch that would have set you back about like $100. So it's just a little bit thing, but we've been playing it for a few days now, and Josh Brown, our impressions after all the months of speculation, all the scrutiny, all the kind of just general despair that this is what has happened after Arkham Knight. What are your thoughts?
It's a little bit rubbish, and that's a shame to say because I was genuinely looking forward to it. For the past 2 weeks on the What Culture Gaming podcast and in these news videos, I was saying I don't like the look of the combat, but I've played so many games where dull combat has been justified because you get a satisfying story. And from the looks of the cutscenes, I thought that's what we were getting here. And my biggest disappointment is, for me, that hasn't come true. In fact, I think the gameplay and the mission design in particular is so bad that it actually flattens and detracts from what good is in there in the story. So overall, I'm quite negative on it, and I'm actually sad for that because this is a new Rocksteady game. I've loved all of their previous superhero work, and I really thought in the story at least this would have been more of that high caliber quality.
Yeah, this is, I described it before we came in, this is the most frustrating and depressing game I think I've played. Like you, the last thing I want to be about a Rocksteady game is negative. Like, I've talked about it before on the channel about how literally Batman Arkham is responsible for me doing this job. It's responsible for many personal events in my life as well. The impact this game series has had on me is ridiculous. And I think we can all agree that there is always an issue when you review a game and it's a case of reviewing the game that it is and the game that you wanted it to be. The issue here is that the game that it is not good, and the game that we wanted it to be would have, I think, been objectively better. There is a real sadness here with the fact that there is so much detail, so much craft, so much technical brilliance in terms of, you know, the environmental design, the character models, level of detail here. The dialogue is hilarious as hell. I think it overcomes the actual kind of edgy premise of the game itself, you know, about killing the Justice League. And so that in itself, it just makes it all the more frustrating because you can see that, you know, for the past, well, obviously Arkham Knight came out in 2015. I believe development on this started in 2016 or so, 2016, 2017. And for the past 8-7 years, this is what Rocksteady, one of our most talented video game studios that gave us the Batman Arkham games, has been working on. And you can tell that there are elements that are like, yes, good, I can see what you're going for here. But the main issue for me is the gameplay. You know, the fact that we've kind of bolted these characters into a third-person shooter game.
Yeah.
And the gameplay variety itself isn't even that interesting. It basically revolves around you jumping over again and again, matching traversal, I went to Sean Connery for a second, matching traversal, trying to basically chain these moves together to get the drop on your enemies and create, you know, combos and build a sense of momentum. The big thing that Rocksteady have been emphasizing before the game's release is that they want to have a trinity of the movement, melee, and shooter action going on here. The issue that I've had is that I find it's quite stoppy start.
Yeah,
in terms
absolutely.
of like you can chain certain moves together, but eventually it's not free-flowing enough for you to feel satisfied in this. And the other issue is that the level design for the main campaign, it essentially just evolves around you going onto different rooftops, jumping over enemies or sliding past enemies and shooting the big glowy spots while you get more and more shiny loot.
No, I absolutely concur with everything you just said. And I apologize, by the way, this is the squeakiest chair imaginable. It sounds like I'm doing something that probably shouldn't be caught on camera in reference to my backside, but that's not what's happening. The frustration is literally coming out of me. But yeah, like, same with you, man. Like, the game is defined by that frustration. You know, it's really rare that I get irate or actively annoyed at a game. Like, you know me, I'm quite a mellow guy when it comes to games.
You're that kind of guy.
I'm too heavily medicated to get too fired up for anything there these days. So when I was found myself completing the main campaign for this last night, and I hit credits, and I felt myself actively annoyed at it. It came from that frustration because this could have been good. When I first jumped into the game and actually got a feel for it, I forgot how good Rocksteady were at creating really silky smooth mechanics. And to the game's credit, it runs at 60 frames per second solid for me, and it's got this big open world. And technically, it's really impressive. It feels good. The shooting is satisfying. Like you said, when you get to chain those traversal elements with the shooting and you're sliding and you're jumping and you're swinging or doing whatever across these different characters, it can be fun in the moment, but it's only fun for a moment because of the mission design and the rinse-repeat nature of it. The fact that I get that, some story missions in games like this, which are supposed to be replayed and replayed and replayed, and you grind it out loot, you do the main story missions, which introduce a template for a side mission, right? Fair enough, for the first few hours, if that's what you need to do to get that mission structure established, fine. My issue is, those missions that you do early on in the campaign not only repeat in the side missions, they repeat in the main campaign as well, so you're doing the same thing, not just in the open world, but in the main missions. And that, for a story of this scale, and for a story that should be so cool, again, like I said, just flattens the experience for me. What you learn in the tutorial is essentially the entire set of mechanics for the rest of the game.
We need to talk about the tutorial.
We do need to make the terrible.
I think it actually ties into the point about level design and the way that with the Batman Arkham games, they really succeeded by when in those moments where it was quieter and you were slowing down and taking in the atmosphere. Whereas with Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, it's the complete reverse. You are zooming through this city, Metropolis, which is densely packed, has lots of really fun Easter eggs that you would come to expect from a Batman Arkham game. Riddler is back there with his riddles. There's lots of cool level design, although kind of aesthetically feels like it jars with the previous Arkham games and tonally as well. But the introduction of this game, if you think about the amazing intros that we got for Batman Arkham Asylum, walking the Joker through intensive treatment, brilliant moment. Arkham City, being captured as Bruce Wayne, walking through, being introduced to all the villains and the environment, all the little teasers that Rocksteady set up there, all the foreshadowing moments are brilliant. Arkham Knight, you set the Joker's body on fire, you get caught in a Scarecrow gas attack. Here, you are put into a position late on in the game where things have gotten a little bit elseworldsy, and you basically learn the tutorial mechanics. And then you get the opening cutscene where it's all the great dialogue shines through, all the really fun presentation stuff shines through. You get the big kind of, this is Metropolis, you're going in, learning everything. Green Lantern gives you his evil tour of the city. But that comes after that tutorial bit, and it's just a great example, I think, of how, even though Rocksteady have been reiterating just how unique and brilliant these combat and traversal mechanics are, the game is never confident enough to tell you to let you discover that on your own. The mechanics never speak for themselves. The game is constantly going out of its way to give you tutorials about these different things, because I think there must be a tacit acknowledgement here that these things don't blend together as well. I know that there was, during the preview events, they sent out gameplay snippets of like a high-tier, like King Shark gameplay, like the guy just, whacking people and shooting them repeatedly, which, aside from the fact that it looks repetitive as hell, and compare that to the gameplay variety you got in an Arkham Knight, where you had, stealth, combat, Batmobile stuff, as much as you may, have your bones with that, it was still variety. So it's just, it's just frustrating to me. I feel like it's a game that has been in development for so long that it's kind of Stockholm Syndrome itself here. Not to speak for anyone at the studio, because clearly there is a lot of talented people at Rocksteady. I'm just really personally upset that what we've got here isn't remarkable. There is a dearth of creativity in the gameplay. You have all these characters. You have Captain Boomerang. I've gone on about it at length. He's not called Captain Gun. You could have come up with interesting ways to make a shooter DC villain game. You could have incorporated different themed weapons that weren't just, here is a black mask gun that fires bullets. You could have maybe done like, here's Mr. Freeze technology, where you can have like cold beam energy or something like that. To me, it's just deeply frustrating and feels like we've gotten the genre first, and then we've slapped DC on it.
Yeah, no, I'd fully agree. And actually, just quickly going back to what you said about the introduction.
I think Flash Whirlwind.
No, it's all great points, man. Like, I think this is the first game that's ever started in medias res towards the end of the game, where I've not been looking forward to getting back to that point. That introduction is so bland and is so handholdy that I just kind of wanted the story to kick in. The fact that you just dropped in without much real context, without much of an introduction, and then you get that quite cool introduction, and then you get tutorials again anyway. It just makes me think, why did we need this section? It just feels like padding. But yeah, going back to what you said there about the lack of variety in the characters themselves, absolutely agree. In fact, in this, I think, is more an indictment of the game that it is my playstyle, but I didn't have to change my primary 2 weapons for the entire game. Nothing demanded me to swap from those Black Mask
Notorious weapons.
Pistol and a minigun, and I was maining Harley Quinn, and I changed around my melee, I changed around my grenade, but those 2 main weapons just added to that feel of I'm doing the same thing over and over again, and it's not even, I don't even feel like I could have shaken things up for myself, because the other weapons, they were just, again, the loot in this game just makes them feel like the exact same gun with higher numbers. Like, this game is not interested, I don't think, in from a gameplay perspective, superheroes or what they can bring to this genre. It's interested in numbers, you know? It's interested in watching the numbers go up and grinding for those better numbered guns that don't really change things. You got a 3-round burst assault rifle, you got a minigun, you got a regular assault rifle, you got a pistol, you got a sniper rifle, and that's kind of it. You've got a few elemental afflictions, as they're known, that you can add on to your melee and your weapons and your grenades, but like, we've seen that before. We were doing that in Gotham Knights a few years ago with the loot system where you could freeze people in place and shatter them.
That was the most frustrating thing, Bright, is that people are going to reach the Marvel's Avengers and Gotham Knights comparisons here quite fairly, to be honest. Especially, you know, Marvel's Avengers, notoriously failed live service game that really kind of screwed the pooch when it came to mission design and, you know, level variety. But what I would say in both Gotham Knights and Marvel's Avengers favors is that they integrated these systems in a little bit more organic of a way.
Yes.
In Gotham Knights, you have the idea of like, oh, they're using freeze things because they're taking technology from the villains or whatever. Whereas with Marvel's Avengers, if you played as the Hulk, you played as the Hulk. You were big, you picked up pieces of debris, threw it at people, you picked up enemies, you beat them to death. Whereas here, you've got King Shark, who I think if I wanted to play as King Shark in a game, I'd want to bite people's heads off and like just do fun stuff like that. But the issue is he's jumping around with a minigun, and it just looks so incongruous to me, this discordant element that you've got going on. And it's even more jarring when the game does slow down. I got to a bit yesterday where I was in the Daily Planet.
Yeah.
And all these great little Easter eggs going around. And again, the dialogue shines through. All the performances are fantastic. You know, Samoa Joe is just brilliant as King Shark. I love the guy who voices Boomerang. He gets lots of really funny lines. It's genuinely really sharp and witty. And again, as someone who does not care for the premise, I think that shines above it. But again, you go from that, those really nice little interior moments, which are so scant and few and far between from what we've come to expect from Rocksteady. Like the Batman Arkham Museum, for a fact, where they reverse the Invisible Predator stuff from those games, and you just compare it to, or contrast it rather, with the bulk and meat of the game, which is clearly being set up for the live service of, this is Metropolis, and you can just fight off Brainiac's invasion forever. And in 2024, it might have played better in 2018.
Yes.
I think maybe people would have been more forgiving of it now, but in 2024, when we've had the glut of live service titles, so many failing, so many being cancelled pre-development or whatever, it just does not play as well. It is a game that we've seen done far too many times, and Rocksteady, even though the narrative and technical elements kind of shine through, it's not enough to overcome what else is there.
I agree. I fully agree. Yeah, like, I was ready to come on this video, you know, even when I was halfway through the game, to say it might be worth it if you're really interested in the story, but I don't even think I can say that now. Certainly not at full price, because I just think the gameplay is that frustrating and that dull that it drags it down. You know, you were talking there about like the situation with the characters and how they're not, you don't play to their strengths within the gameplay. I always felt when I was actually playing the game that there was probably a good game that you could make out of this story in Metropolis. Every time Wonder Woman shows up, I just kept thinking, why am I not playing as Wonder Woman? Why am I not playing that game? Because they can't integrate, I don't think, the plot beats into that gameplay itself, because they're so beholden to the structures of missions that they've set up for the live service. Like, simple things can't even happen in this framework. Like, there are so many times where you like a special car will turn up. Maybe the Batmobile is there, and you think, am I going to be able to jump in the Batmobile, do something with that? And no, it's going to form a mission template, which is you need to protect a car that someone else is driving to a certain point. So you're there on the outside of the Batmobile thinking, I wish I was just in it. I wish I was in it, instead of using a bit of scenery, a bit of iconography to try and give flair to a mission that we've already done, and it doesn't work for me in that regard.
Yeah, and it's also one of those where I'm looking at it, and there's been obviously so much consternation over the fact that this is a new game in the Arkham series, and I don't think it does any favors by being set in that mythos, you know. There's a bit earlier on where you are in the Justice League's museum and they're all talking to you and they're being like, you know, talking to like the kids attending the Justice League, you know, gearing up for the punchline of these guys are all evil and they're going to do lots of bloody, gruesome, violent things. That in itself, I find really cynical and I'm not really a fan of. I think Kevin Conroy does an absolutely amazing job as evil Batman, a role that he is relishing, I feel, here. He delivers some brilliant lines. But the actual way that this resolves after you've had all these years of Batman Arkham development and teasers for future games, the fact that the next time we see it, it's being destroyed. Is just so frankly bizarre to me. And if I was at Warner Brothers, I would have swapped Gotham Knights and Suicide Squad around in terms of which one was set in the Arkhamverse.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, we'll go into the ending of the game in a different video. But overall thoughts on Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, I am not impressed. I wanted to give it a chance. Obviously, there's been so much negativity here. Outlined, there's a huge backlash. There are people who are going to like this game, and for those, I say more power to you. But for me, this is just a really sad, frustrating experience. I love Rocksteady dearly, but this is just not it. And I don't think it was ever going to be it. And I just hope that after this, after they've wrapped up all the content on, you know, I think they're like 4 seasons of stuff coming for the post-game of Suicide Squad, that we can maybe get something that is a little bit more closer to the Rocksteady viewer. Not a repeat of Batman Arkham, but something that taps into what made us fall in love with that studio in the first place.
Yeah, I'd fully agree, man, because there's so much potential in here. Like you mentioned, not just to reiterate things you've said, because you've essentially summed up everything I think about the game, which is great. But you talked about the denseness of that metropolis. In the thing that sums up the game for me is if you have a freeze frame of, you know, your character looking out against that backdrop, it looks like the best superhero game you've ever played. Like the amount of stuff going on, the architecture, the color palette, it feels like a next-gen game in that regard, and in terms of it, you know, playing in 60 frames per second. But when you get down to the nitty-gritty, I just found it hollow. It is just all of that scene setting, and it doesn't have anything there at the heart of it to really make it worth seeing out. Not to mention, again, no spoilers for what happens at the end, but it's not like you get a satisfying conclusion, put it that way. It feels like there's some kind of, this is me being an almost conspiracy theorist, mandate from WB Games.
The question here now.
Yeah. Mandate from WB Games to have all of their releases, no matter what franchises they're in, just function. The story conclusions function as a setup for an open world. We got the first taste of this a few years ago with Middle-earth Shadow of War, which did something very similar. And Scott Tailford reliably tells me that Mortal Kombat 1 does something similar as well. And now to get this, it didn't. I'd have been less annoyed at it if it had that satisfying conclusion, but it doesn't. And when you get to the end and you realize everything you've played so far has been a prelude to a live service grind, that's when I actively get annoyed. That's when I actively get frustrated, because there is so much good in there. Everything with Batman, I actually think is way better than the other members of the Justice League, and I don't know whether that's a performance thing, whether it's a design thing, whether it's just because he's the only character we actually know and have history with. Same with Harley and their relationship. Performances are great. Combat has something special in another game that would have been satisfying, but it's the core of it that's letting all of those flashes of greatness down.
Yeah, totally agree. But yeah, let us know if you're picking up Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League down in the comments below, or whether you're giving it a skip. Be sure to like the video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe to What Culture Gaming, where we're going to have more Suicide Squantent?
Yeah!
Suicide Squantent.
Let's do
What
that.
are we, some kind of Suicide
Squantent?
I've been Ewan. This has been Josh.
Bye-bye.
Bye. We'll see you on the Suicide Squad Fortnite bus.
Yeah!